Berlin, 23 April, 1945. The sound of Russian artillery is constant. The city shakes beneath the bombardment. Somewhere in the Reich Chancellery, Hitler sits in his bunker, cut off from the outside world, completely unaware of what has already happened. Weeks earlier, thousands of kilometers away, in Moscow, Soviet leadership had received detailed intelligence about German weapons programs, troop movements, industrial capacity, and strategic intentions. These were not intercepts or inference. They were actual blueprints, genuine plans, real secrets stolen from German archives, and transmitted through a network of operatives so extensive that every major decision Hitler made had already been anticipated by Stalin. This was the result of one of the most ambitious espionage operations in modern history, the systematic theft and transmission of German documentation. And it fundamentally changed the course of the Second World War. Soviet intelligence services operated with something British and American counterparts could only dream of: access to original German military and scientific documentation. Plans for new weapons systems, assessments of troop strength, details of industrial capacity, economic reports on production output, even Hitler's personal directives and strategic assessments. All of it found its way into the hands of Soviet intelligence officers who could brief their commanders with absolute confidence they possessed factual information, not mere conjecture or speculation. Yet for decades, this achievement remained hidden. The operation was compartmentalized beyond measure. Only a handful truly understood its scope. The operatives involved, many brilliant intellectuals and committed communists, were swept up in Stalin's paranoia after the war. Some were executed. Others disappeared into the Gulag. Their names were erased. The files were marked secret. And so the true story of how Soviet intelligence transformed the intelligence war remained buried for nearly 50 years. What made this operation unique was not merely that Soviet spies stole documents, but that they did so with organization and systematic purpose that anticipated the modern intelligence state. They didn't steal randomly or for propaganda value. They targeted with surgical precision military research institutes, weapons development facilities, industrial planning departments, communication centers. They understood that a single blueprint revealed as much about German capabilities as months of surveillance. They knew captured documents could guide their own research programs. Information, properly processed and distributed, could be translated directly into military advantage. The fundamental challenge was that Germany was a closed and heavily guarded society. The Gestapo was ruthless and omnipresent. Penetrating German military establishments was extraordinarily difficult and dangerous. Conventional intelligence methods had already failed catastrophically. Germany's 1941 invasion caught Stalin almost entirely by surprise. Soviet intelligence had to rebuild its networks, whilst fighting for national survival against existential threat. The answer was brutally practical. Germany, even whilst at war, operated as a sprawling bureaucracy. Documents were created, filed, copied, distributed. They moved through chains of command and were stored in archives and offices. If you could access those offices, you could simply take them. This was the first great insight of Soviet intelligence. Documents were objects that could be photographed. A small camera could transform a document into intelligence in seconds. Documents could be duplicated and passed to multiple handlers. A single photograph could be printed dozens of times. Each copy could go to a different department and every level of command. The information did not degrade with retelling or transmission. It was not subject to human memory or personal interpretation. It was the actual evidence, unimpeachable and precise. Soviet intelligence developed photographic espionage capabilities in the 1930s. Their camera technology was not superior to German or British equivalents, but they understood the tactical advantage. A compact camera could photograph documents at close range and be removed without immediate detection. Cameras were typically German-made Leisha, or Contax models, reliable instruments. In trained hands, such a camera could photograph hundreds of pages per session. The network centered on the GRU, the main intelligence directorate of the Red Army, which focused on military intelligence and weapons development. The NKVD also conducted infiltration and theft operations. Both organizations operated independently, but were aligned on German documents. This intelligence was vital. General Philipp Golikov headed the GRU during the war and understood the intelligence gap with Germany had to be closed rapidly. The operatives came from diverse backgrounds and training. German communists who had fled to the Soviet Union understood the language, culture, and bureaucratic systems intimately. Soviet citizens with technical education and scientific backgrounds were trained in intelligence tradecraft and operational security. The best operatives combined linguistic ability, technical skill, and psychological resilience under extreme stress. Many had worked in Germany in the 1930s and understood the intelligence environment. Soviet services recruited those who could comprehend and evaluate technical documents effectively. Getting operatives into Germany was difficult but possible. Some worked in neutral countries, Sweden, Switzerland, Turkey. Others were smuggled across borders with forged papers. Many operated in occupied territories, particularly France, where German military facilities maintained archives. Berlin itself and industrial centers housed major German establishments. Once inside target facilities, operatives attempted to access files and blueprints through various methods. Some worked with German resistance figures or recruited civilian contacts. Others used blackmail against vulnerable individuals. Some operatives simply walked into buildings with confidence and appropriate documentation during wartime chaos. Once alone near documents, small cameras captured technical specifications and plans. The personal risk was extraordinary and constant. Discovery meant execution by the Gestapo. Yet operatives continued, driven by ideological conviction, patriotic duty, or coercion from Soviet security services. The technical apparatus was sophisticated and well organized. Soviet intelligence established safe houses throughout occupied Europe with darkrooms for immediate film development. Photographs were carefully microfilmed, reducing thousands of pages of intelligence to capsules small enough to carry concealed. Couriers transported these microfilms across multiple borders using diplomatic channels, commercial routes, and concealment methods. Redundancy was deliberate. The same intelligence traveled via multiple routes to guarantee Moscow received critical information. In Moscow, GRU teams processed incoming intelligence systematically. Documents were photographed multiple times to create multiple copies. Distribution was carefully controlled and compartmentalized. Each recipient was selected based on security clearance and specific need. Sensitive documents were kept under armed guard but made available to guide Soviet military and industrial strategy. Soviet commanders increasingly possessed detailed knowledge of German capabilities. When Germany deployed new tanks, the Soviets had specifications within weeks. When new aircraft entered service, Soviet intelligence had technical drawings. When headquarters issued strategic directives, Moscow knew about them. This created an intelligence asymmetry. The Germans operated with incomplete information, whilst the Soviets had genuine blueprints and strategic plans. Soviet intelligence learned of German work on advanced weapons through obtained documents. They discovered the V weapons program, the V1 and V2 systems intended against Britain. Documents provided technical specifications and deployment locations. More significantly, they learned of German atomic weapons research. This intelligence was critical for Soviet planning of their own atomic program. If you are finding this interesting, A quick subscribe helps more than you know. The comparison with Allied intelligence efforts is instructive and revealing. The British and American intelligence services possessed remarkable capabilities in some areas. They had broken German Enigma codes and read high-level military communications. They developed sophisticated aerial reconnaissance techniques. Yet signals intelligence had limitations. Codes were changed periodically. Not all communications were encrypted. Aerial reconnaissance showed what was built, but not how it worked. Obtained German documents had no such limitations. A blueprint showed exactly how something worked. A technical specification revealed performance characteristics. A production schedule indicated how many units would be built. There was no ambiguity, no interpretation needed. The information was direct and authoritative. The Soviets had a fundamentally different priority than their Western allies. They wanted to know what Germany was building, not just to counter it immediately, but to build better versions and improve their own designs after the war. Documents obtained transferred technological knowledge across borders at a speed and scale that normal scientific development could never achieve in peacetime. The psychological impact of this intelligence advantage was substantial and demoralizing for German command. Soviet commanders approached battles with greater confidence because they possessed detailed information about German capabilities and intentions. They could plan operations with reference to genuine data rather than estimates. The Germans, by contrast, operated with increasing uncertainty. They sometimes suspected plans had been compromised but could not pinpoint how. This created paranoia in German command and reduced operational efficiency as resources were diverted to security measures. Some specific operations have been documented by historians. The penetration of German military headquarters, theft of documents from the German Foreign Ministry, systematic photographing of German technical specifications in occupied France. All contributed to an intelligence flow that was extraordinarily extensive. This operation's legacy extended beyond the war. The techniques and tradecraft developed during wartime were refined throughout the Cold War. The GRU and KGB would continue using these methods to steal Western secrets throughout the second half of the 20th century. Material impact was direct. Soviet weapons incorporated knowledge from German specifications. Soviet research was guided by German progress. The Soviet Union emerged not just as military victor, but as a nation that had systematically acquired German technical knowledge. After the war, Soviet delegations visited German facilities and recruited German scientists. German intelligence never developed equivalent capability for obtaining Soviet documents and secrets. They conducted espionage and recruited agents, but they were unable to systematically access Soviet military archives or technical specifications. This was partly because the Soviet Union was more compartmentalized and repressive, partly because Germany lacked equivalent pre-war networks in Soviet territory, and partly because the Soviets operated from their homeland with greater security measures. The asymmetry was clear. The Soviets possessed better information about German capability than the Germans had about Soviet capability. Many factors contributed to Soviet victory: manpower reserves, industrial resilience, climate, German strategic mistakes. But the intelligence advantage was a significant accelerant. It allowed commanders to make better decisions and prevented Germany from achieving surprises that might have altered the war's course. After the war, the people who conducted this operation largely disappeared from public view. Many were executed during Stalin's paranoia. Files were sealed. Only after the Soviet collapse did some records emerge. Even now, significant portions remain classified. The impact of this hidden weapon was to give the Soviet Union an information advantage unmatched by any other power in the Second World War. Information from German documents could not be dismissed as misinterpretation. It was authoritative, specific, and directly usable. It flowed from Berlin to Moscow throughout the war. The war ended with the Third Reich in ashes, its territory partitioned, its people defeated. Soviet forces stood triumphantly in Berlin. Soviet commanders had anticipated German movements throughout the war and ultimately overwhelmed resistance. The systematic theft of German secrets, photographed blueprints, and transmitted documents analyzed in Moscow was one underappreciated factor in Soviet victory. This hidden weapon was information converted into military advantage through organization and tradecraft. It won no battles directly, but it was there, shaping every major decision and guiding strategy, reminding us that in war, knowledge is power.